So I'm sat here with my buddy and co-founder, Professor Greg Whyte, OBE. Don't forget the OBE.
Don't forget that.
And we're going to talk a bit about vitamin D and why we need it going into the winter, aren't we?
We're definitely going into winter, and we're definitely going to talk about why it's important.
It's cold, it's wet, it's miserable. I personally hate it. I think I'm going to move abroad to train for the entire winter season, get some sun. But actually, on a serious note, we do need vitamin D over the winter, don't we?
No, we definitely do. I mean, what you point to is the important thing, and actually what we suffer from in the northern hemispheres during our winter is actually shorter days, and of course shorter days mean less sunlight. Add on top of that the fact is that we see less sun anyway, particularly in Britain, and one of the probably the best way of creating vitamin D is actually through skin exposure to natural sunlight. When that's absent, that means that we have to top up that vitamin D through oral sources. In other words, we have to consume that vitamin D. So vitamin D supplementation during the winter months in the Northern Hemisphere, really important for some people.
Yeah, real key. We'll come back to how much you need in a minute. But I think something that we all understand is when we're in the sun, we actually feel better because our immune system is actually stronger. And that is part of the role of vitamin C, isn't it?
I mean, vitamin D is almost ubiquitous. In other words, it's everywhere, all systems in the body. I mean, at one end of the spectrum, it's actually linked to things like cardiovascular health. So in other words, heart health is linked to vitamin D. But it's also linked to immune function, bone health, muscle health and strength. So it's incredible, actually, the range of body functions that vitamin D is really important for, and that's why we take so much care over vitamin D from childhood all the way through to old age.
Now we're recommending about 4,000 international units per day, which is 4 of the tablets. You can flex that up and down depending on different factors, I guess. What would influence that?
Well, I think to some extent, look, 4,000 international units a day, you're safe with that level, number one, so there's no reason why you wouldn't take that every single day. I think perhaps on those days where you're getting lots of exposure to natural sunlight, if you happen to go away, for example, for a period of time to a sunny clime, or there are some of those beautiful winter days that we get in the UK, and you've got the opportunity to get outside, then perhaps what you can do is just tailor back on that because you're going to get natural production of vitamin D. But to my mind, what I would do is 4,000 international units a day. I would just stick with that every day, and effectively what you can do, that will optimise your vitamin D level.
What about if I'm going to go into winter season work, YT, and I'm going to start working really hard and I'm going to really drain my body? I'm doing multiple brick sessions or some really hard sessions, maybe even 2 or 3 sessions a day. I know I'm feeling rubbish. I know my immune system's starting to crash. I'm getting the sore throats, I'm getting the sniffles. Can I actually increase my vitamin D? Will it help?
I mean, number one, yes, you can. I think it's a really interesting point that you raise, actually, because we've spoken about the issue of sunlight and natural sunlight exposure. But interestingly, as we come into that winter period, classically we talk about things like winter flu. But what we do know is those coughs and colds, what we call upper respiratory tract infections, things like rhinovirus and those things that cause blocked nose, runny nose, sore throats, etc., are much more prevalent and they're much more widespread. And because when we're training very, very hard, because again, winter, we see big volume training, what that can do is it can suppress the immune system. And so it leaves us open to more infections. And so therefore, all of those things conspire to tell us that what we want to try and do is protect the immune system as best we can. And so from hydration through to nutrition and including vitamin D, it's really, really important that what we do is we really focus on trying to optimize our immune function to avoid illness so that we can actually keep training and keep that quality training throughout the winter months.
Now, with our YouPerform family, it's about a 50-50 split, male and female. And there's times in a female's life, especially, like pregnancy and stuff like that, when there is always questions asked about supplement. Should I take extra? Should I take less? With vitamin D, is there any time in your life where you need to be careful, cautious of taking vitamin D, or is it a vitamin for every day?
I mean, vitamin D generally is a vitamin for every day. There are very few contraindications. In other words, it signals that you shouldn't be taking it. I certainly think when it comes to important moments in your life, things like pregnancy, what's really important there is actually you keep very close contact with your healthcare professionals, with your midwife, with your obs and gynae specialist. Keep them updated on what you're doing to make sure that what you get is the best information from them and they know what you're doing. But I think in general, vitamin D is a natural product. We find it in food sources. So if you want to increase your vitamin D in your nutrition, things like egg yolk, oily fish have got high concentrations of vitamin D. So it's naturally occurring. It's there all the time. By supplementing, effectively what you're doing is you're just making sure, for those of us in Northern Hemispheres who've got low natural light exposure, whose diet may not quite be broad enough to increase or to optimise vitamin D within our normal daily diet, it just gives us that security that we've got enough vitamin D on board.
And one more question for you, because I know you've just announced you're building up to another major challenge. I'm about a week and a half away from my last big race, the European Championships of the season. In a build-up to a big competition or a big race or something which is going to put your body under massive, massive stress and pressure, is there a justification for loading vitamin D, or does it really make no difference?
I wouldn't load vitamin D. I mean, effectively what you've got is you've got a sort of physiologic limit. Is the body knows how much vitamin D that it requires. And so therefore there is no benefit. It's that lovely conversation that we always have with athletes, and that is that there is this sort of dogma that if a little is good, then more is better. And it absolutely, I mean, it's just not true for the vast majority of. In fact, it's not true for oxygen. So I think what you should do is stick to the recommendations.
Yeah.
If there is any concern, then what you should do is contact your health professional. So contact your GP or contact a health professional to find out if there's a particular issue, which may mean that you need to up the dose that you're taking. But I think in general, stick to the recommended dose, irrespective of where you're at, and I think that'll work for you.
Cool. So you've heard it here first. Keep taking your vitamin D. Keep breathing because oxygen is good. But also keep well this winter. Greg, as always, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Always a pleasure, James.